One of Hollywood's most beloved legends, Gene Wilder, is still alive and well. Films such as Young Frankenstein, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and countless more showcase his genius. But behind the comedic personas and consternation he elicited, Wilder had a secretive life, particularly in his last years. Many were curious about his last days, his health, and the real him outside of the spotlight after his 2016 death. Karen Burr remained silent for a long time, his wife. She has finally broken her long silence. What she says could alter people's perceptions of Gene for all time. Love and sorrow in Gene Wilder's life. Jerome Silverman, better known as Gene Wilder, was born on June 11, 1933, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He became one of the most famous and beloved performers of all time in Hollywood. Wilder had a special talent for combining vulnerability, emotional depth, and humor. By the time he was 13 years old, he had already begun training as an actor, thanks to his mother's encouragement. His career was defined by his boundless curiosity and innate talent, as a reflection of his dedication to both comprehending performance and becoming an expert storyteller. Wilder decided to attend the University of Iowa in 1951 to study communication and theater arts. His schooling took him all across the world. The classical training he received at England's Bristol Old Vic Theatre School in 1955 informed his later performances in terms of timing, expressiveness, and precision. The United States Army drafted Wilder in 1956, temporarily altering his course. He learned discipline, responsibility, and the truth about human frailty while serving as a medic in New York and Pennsylvania. It was back to New York that he went after finishing his term. Passionate in honing his skills, he enrolled in classes with Lee Strasberg, a famous acting coach famed for his method practices, at both the HB Studio and the Actors Studio. During this time of dedicated study, Wilder honed the nuance, authenticity, and emotional depth that would set him apart from other humorous performers of his time. He took the stage name Gene Wilder in 1961, drawing inspiration from Thornton Wilder, a playwright, and Thomas Wolfe's character Eugene Gant. A new professional identity and a name that would be known all across the globe soon began with this transition. Wilder started to make a name for himself in the world of theater in the early 1960s. In 1963, he wed actress Mary Mirier, but they were only married until 1965. During this time, he collaborated with Anne Braftoft on stage productions like Mother Courage and Her Children. When Wilder was introduced to director Mel Brooks by Braftoft, it was a watershed moment in his career. He played a terrified undertaker who was abducted by the notorious outlaws in his breakthrough film performance in 1967's Bonnie and Clyde. Despite his little part, he made an impression on viewers and critics alike with his skill at balancing dramatic tension with comedic moments. But in 1968, with Brooks producing, Wilder's finally broke through. His portrayal of Leo Bloom reinforced his reputation as an actor who could provide charm, wit, and comedic timing in equal measure, and it also won him an Oscar nod for Best Supporting Actor. One of Wilder's most famous roles was as Willy Wonka in 1971's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Despite the film's early financial struggles, Wilder's portrayal of Willy Wonka won over moviegoers and helped propel the character into pop culture legend status. His interpretation of the character, which combined whimsical elements with an air of unpredictability and subtle sorrow, left an impact that would last for centuries. Films like Blazing Saddles 1974 and Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex 1972 showcased Wilder's continuous collaboration with Mel Brooks in the early 1970s. Young Frankenstein, which he co-wrote and acted in 1974, garnered him yet another Oscar nomination, this time for Best Adapted Screenplay. Wilder's career reached a turning point from the mid-1970s into the 1980s when he and Richard Pryor established a fruitful comedy partnership. Silver Streaks, 1976, Stir Crazy 19 and See No Evil Hear No Evils 1989 were among the films in which they co-starred. Due to their chemistry, Wilder was able to display her flexibility alongside Pryor. While retaining his individuality on screen, he could modify his humorous style to enhance the performance of another actor. Commercially and critically praised, these partnerships solidified Wilder's position as a prominent character in comedy. There were happy times and sad times in his personal life at the same time. His co-star in the 1982 film Hanky Panky, Gilda Radner, was his wife, whom he wed in 1982. Their subsequent collaborations in 1984's The Woman in Red and 1986 Haunted Honeymoon skillfully fused their private and public lives, winning over audiences and critics alike. Tragically, Radner died in 1989 of ovarian cancer, and Wilder was profoundly affected by this occurrence. In private and in public, his life took a dramatic shift after her death. In her honor, Wilder took up the cause of raising cancer awareness and helped found Gilda's Club, a charity that aids cancer patients and their families. Karen Burr, whom Wilder wed in 1991, was his partner right up until he passed away. He was able to escape the limelight of Hollywood and enjoy a more sedate existence when his marriage provided him with security and companionship. The 1999 diagnosis of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma put Wilder in a difficult health position. He showed even more resiliency and resolve by beating the disease with the help of chemotherapy and a stem cell transplant. Wilder shifted her focus to writing in the 2000s, releasing books and memoirs such as Kiss Me Like a Stranger in 2005. Readers could see into his mind, his creative process, and the events that molded his life and work through these writings. His 2003 Emmy for a guest appearance on Will and Grace proved that his charisma and talent were still captivating far into his twilight years. Fans and reviewers alike were captivated by his contributions to film, television, and literature. Even though he made fewer public appearances, Wilder opted to concentrate on private activities, contemplation, and self-care by 2013, thus removing herself from the public glare. In his latter years, he lived life to the fullest, free from the pressures of Hollywood. A life devoted to art, creativity, and humanity is reflected in Gene Wilder's meteoric rise from an inquisitive youngster supported by his mother to a legendary actor, writer, and cultural icon. The challenges and disease that Gene Wilder's faced. Despite the lasting popularity of Gene Wilder's films and the fondness viewers had for him, his extraordinary career was not without of difficulties and controversy. Even though Wilder's films like Young Frankenstein, Willy Wonka, and The Chocolate Factory are hailed as masterpieces today, they didn't always do well at the box office. Wilder saw the unpredictable nature of Hollywood early in his career, when the financial success of a picture dictated the amount of support an actor or director would receive. Not even undertakings of iconic status were able to avoid these problems. There were times of doubt when his pictures weren't well received, and Wilder had to face the truth of a business that cared more about short-term profits than lasting creative impact. As a filmmaker, Wilder attempted to increase his creative influence, but he also encountered critical criticism and financial difficulties. He was the director of various films, such as 1985's Haunted Honeymoon, 1984's The Woman in Red, and 1975's The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes's Smarter Brother. These efforts showed that Wilder's was not afraid to try new things creatively, although they were mostly unappreciated and failed to make much money. On occasion, critics and industry watchers cast doubt on his directing chops, speculating that he would be more suited to acting. In spite of this, Wilder never wavered in his will to realize his artistic vision, and he faced the logistical obstacles of filmmaking head-on. Both his belief in the significance of investigating many aspects of narrative and his ambition to take creative risks were evident in his directing ventures. During his marriage to Gilda Radner, an actress and comedian, Wilder also faced intensely personal struggles that were exposed in the media. The press lavished attention on Radner's fight against ovarian cancer in the late 1980s, and on occasion, tabloids lambasted Wilder for apparently failing to recognize indications early enough. Although the coverage was mostly conjectural, it nonetheless brought unwanted attention to Wilder at a time when she needed it the least. He vehemently refuted these assertions, stressing that cancer's unexpected nature makes it impossible to forecast how the disease will develop. The conflict between the prying eyes of the media and the emotional truths of individual tragedy was shown by the stark contrast between Wilder's public condemnation and her private commitment to Radner. Wilder channeled her sorrow over Radner's death in 1989 into an unwavering dedication to raising cancer awareness and advocating for better treatment options. He took action based on a deeply painful personal experience by co-founding Gilda's Club, an organization that helps cancer patients and their families, extending well beyond his cinematic persona. This work showcased a side of Wilder that was resilient, empathetic, and committed to doing tribute to Radner's memory. Someone driven by empathy and a wish to improve the lot of others around him. Wilder finally distanced himself from the film industry during the 1990s and 2000s due to the demands of Hollywood and personal and professional issues. Violence, formulaic storytelling, and commercial practices that stifle originality have become more prominent in Hollywood, and he openly expressed his disgust with this tendency. The fact that Wilder has stepped away from the limelight has led some to speculate that he is resentful or uninterested in the business that formerly lauded him. But Wilder presented his decision as an intentional act of self-determination, founded on a wish to value solitude, originality, and satisfaction above all else. By taking a step back, he gave himself permission to engage in activities that made him happy, like writing, painting, and other creative pursuits that were uniquely him. His impact and significance were not diminished by this retreat. It was more of a statement about taking charge of his life and career, which helped establish him as an artist whose work was influenced by principles like honesty and thoughtfulness rather than passing fads. His struggle with Alzheimer's illness was another part of Wilder's personal life that garnered media notice. Some felt the need to criticize the family for being slow to announce his diagnosis, while others questioned whether famous people should be required to provide private medical information. But as Wilder's nephew would later clarify, keeping the diagnosis a secret was always the plan. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was a character that Wilder hoped would bring delight to children's lives without causing them to feel down or let down. This choice shows how carefully Wilder considered his audience and how much he wanted to keep the purity and happiness of his work alive. In spite of his terrible sickness, Wilder's continued to put the joy of others, especially the kids who had been moved to tears by his performances, at the top of his list of priorities. He demonstrated an analytical and methodical approach to his work and personal life by striking this delicate balance between anonymity and transparency. Karen Burr's love, which knows no bounds. The long-term connection between Gene Wilder's and Karen Burr had a significant impact on his later life. They provided him with stability and quiet devotion during a difficult period in his life. Karen Burr is an incredibly competent and kind person who can meet the practical and psychological requirements of her clients thanks to her experience as a speech therapist and clinical supervisor who focuses on lip reading. Since she had trained Wilder for his portrayal as a deaf man in the 1989 film See No Evil, Hear No Evil, she had extensive experience in communication and therapy, which greatly facilitated their relationship. Wilder had previously worked for the New York League for the Hard of Hearing. Working alongside Wilder's on this project gave Burr a front row seat to his extraordinary skill. She could see the care, attention, and determination he put into developing a character with a specific physical disability. The first sparks of their romance began to fly between them during this time, as they worked diligently on the role. A friendship based on trust, admiration, and gratitude for one another's commitment to their jobs was born out of their shared experiences in film prep and their mutual respect for one another's abilities and expertise. After Wilder's third wife Gilda Radner passed away, the couple got back in touch, and they discovered they understood one another's struggles with loss, overcoming adversity, and living under the microscope. Reconnecting with Burr brought Wilder the solace and understanding he had been seeking after the devastating emotional and psychological consequences of Radner's death. Their rekindled bond went beyond friendship in its hallmarks of mutual support, companionship, and intuitive comprehension of one another's experiences. The friendship that Wilder formed with Karen Burr was based on mutual commitment, empathy, and trust. It also brought him personal comfort. Wilder and Burr tied the knot on September 8, 1991, beginning a marriage that would endure for 25 years, until Wilder's passed away in 2016. Despite being kept out of the public eye, their marriage became a defining part of Wilder's later life. It gave him love, stability, and a nurturing environment where he could concentrate on his own health, reflect, and enjoy life away from Hollywood. This long-term marriage stood in stark contrast to his former partnerships, which were frequently in the spotlight, and it brought to light a time of calm, closeness, and seclusion that he had not regularly enjoyed in the years before. Karen Burr was more than just Wilder's wife. She played an integral part in his life. After he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, she took on the role of main caregiver for him. There were physical and emotional obstacles that needed to be carefully managed and constantly attended to due to the disease's progressive nature and substantial cognitive impact. A deep commitment that included both practical and emotional assistance was shown by Burr's devotion to managing Wilder's health and preserving his quality of life during his sickness. Her duties included making sure Wilder was comfortable and engaged during his treatment, as well as coordinating care with other medical specialists and supervising his medication and appointment schedules. With Burr's help, Wilder was able to face the difficulties of a degenerative condition in a dignified manner, maintaining his identity and continuity despite the slow but steady changes brought on by the sickness. The challenges of privacy faced by Karen Burr. In his later years, which he spent intimately with his wife Karen Burr, Gene Wilder skillfully navigated the delicate balance between personal devotion and public perception. In contrast to the spotlight that follows the lives of many famous people, Wilder and Boyer chose to keep a low profile, prioritizing privacy and closeness over fame and fortune. In order to keep Wilder's private life out of the spotlight, they were careful about when and how they spoke to the media, whether it was interviews or public appearances. He was able to escape the constant scrutiny of the public by taking this tack, which was especially helpful when he was ill and bedridden, even though they needed this much space for their own comfort. It did cause some friction with the media and fans from time to time. People started to wonder why a public figure of his ilk was so reclusive and why there was so little data available regarding his health. Regarding Wilder's health in the years after his Alzheimer's diagnosis, some were curious about and worried about the couple's private lives, while some questioned the couple's decision to keep such private details out of the public eye. Others wanted to know more about his last years and how his illness affected his daily life. Many were curious about the full scope of his illness and its progression. The dedication to seclusion by Wilder and Burr was deliberate and showed great regard for the people who had always appreciated his work. After working in show business for decades, Wilder knew how his characters could affect viewers of all ages. Willy Wonka in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and his many films with Mel Brooks cemented his place in popular culture as an icon of fantasy, wonder, and good times. He wanted his audience to be able to enjoy his work without worrying about the dark side of life, so he kept his Alzheimer's diagnosis a secret. This way, the joy and innocence of his characters would remain intact. He was self-aware enough to know that his concerts brought joy, tears of sadness, and fond memories to many, and that if he had been more forthcoming about the extent of his health problems, his audiences may not have responded to or remembered him in the same way. With a deep grasp of the decision's personal implications for Wilder and the broader emotional impact on fans who had followed his career for decades, Burr, in her role as caregiver and husband, wholeheartedly supported it. By working together, they made it possible for Wilder to spend his last years in an atmosphere that was normal, comfortable, and respectful of his dignity, not burdened with the intrusive scrutiny that frequently comes with celebrity status. Prioritizing emotional well-being over external affirmation, their approach to privacy displays a delicate balance between personal integrity and public perception. It wasn't just about dodging the press for Wilder. Preserving the depth of his characters' emotions and the impact they had on countless readers was of the utmost importance. The importance of Boyer in preserving this equilibrium is immense. Her assistance went beyond just taking care of the family. She protected his right to an intimate, meaningful life by keeping the public's eye off his personal story, particularly when Wilder's disease advanced and the day-to-day challenges of Alzheimer's disease intensified. This demanded thoughtful decision-making, clear communication, and empathy. Their relationship was a model of the kind of quiet, deliberate decision-making that many people don't see, but which is essential for the respect and mental health of famous people. Speculation and occasional criticism ensued as a result of the decision to keep Wilder's diagnosis hidden, even if that was not their aim. Given Wilder's enormous cultural influence and the adoration audiences had grown for him over the years, some critics stated that followers had an obligation to know. Questions about why his family had hidden such a major part of his life arose in articles and online conversations. Some people thought that if the public knew how a public figure dealt with a chronic illness, it might have helped bring more attention to Alzheimer's disease. Some people took the family's decision to keep quiet about how his sickness was progressing as an indication of their lack of honesty and openness. However, the extremely subjective reasons given by the couple for their choice were frequently ignored in these criticisms. Wilder felt that his audience's impression of his work, particularly the whimsical, inventive, and happy characters that had characterized his career, may have been drastically changed had word of his Alzheimer's diagnosis been widely known. He tried to make sure that the character's condition didn't overpower the audience's emotional connection to them. because he knew that both were interdependent. In this respect, Burr's backing was crucial. She was sensitive to the emotional and practical challenges of safeguarding Wilder's privacy from her dual roles as husband and caretaker. Even though there would inevitably be some public attention, she understood that it shouldn't compromise his personal life or his comfort. The pair were able to keep control of their story because of her meticulous handling of public participation, selective media contact, and unfaltering commitment to the mental and physical health of the Wilders. This involved doing things like keeping Wilder's sickness a secret and creating conditions where he could still have a full and meaningful life despite the challenges caused by Alzheimer's disease. With her help, he was able to keep his sense of normalcy, stay focused on what made him happy, and face the challenges of his illness with grace and determination. At long last, Karen Burr discusses Gene Wilder. In addition to the strong relationship he had with his wife Karen Burr, the realities of caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease had a major impact on Gene Wilder's final years. Burr discussed her 35-year marriage to Wilder in an exclusive article for ABC News, going into depth about the good times and the hard times they had while she was caring for him. During his last years of fighting the degenerative disease, Wilder relied on Burr for care, solace, and emotional support. He was famous for his parts in Young Frankenstein, Willy Wonka, and The Chocolate Factory, as well as his many collaborations with Mel Brooks. Her thoughts provide a raw glimpse into the lives of people who care for Alzheimer's patients, showing the love that keeps caregivers going as well as the devastating impact the disease may have on them. Burr started her story by thinking about the crazy turn her life took when she married a famous actor, and then devoted herself to helping him cope with his terminal illness. "I never envisioned myself marrying a movie star. I also never saw myself spending years of my life caring for one, but I've done both. Love was the reason for the first. Alzheimer's disease, the second." This admission highlights the complexity of her path with Wilder. The constant struggles of an illness that slowly but surely destroys one's motor skills, memory, and cognitive abilities cast a shadow over a life filled with love, creativity, and camaraderie. According to Burr, caring for someone is more than just a job. It's an intensely personal experience that calls for tolerance, strength, and flexibility in the face of uncertainty. He played a deaf man in the 1989 film See No Evil, Hear No Evil, where they initially met. Burr used her professional abilities to their initial meeting as a speech pathologist who specializes with the hearing impaired. Her career in New York City had given her extensive experience in supporting individuals with communication challenges, which Wilder approached with the same meticulous dedication he brought to all his roles. As Wilder sought her guidance to understand his character, she recalled that even though she grew up in a small town in Idaho, she had worked with him extensively. They developed a strong personal connection by working together professionally, which enabled them to observe each other's dedication to their work and foster mutual respect. Wilder and Burr swiftly established a friendship based on mutual understanding, companionship, and deep admiration for each other's compassion and character after reconnecting following the passing of Wilder's first wife, Gilda Rauner. After tying the knot in 1991, they embarked on a lifelong journey together, sharing interests in tennis, art, dancing, and travel. Memories of the early, subtle, and unsettling symptoms of Alzheimer's disease flooded Burr's mind, lashing out at their grandson or misjudging spatial distances, while routine activities like cycling were among Wilder's surprise behaviors after he had been so kind and considerate in all interactions, even with something as little as a fly falling on him. Burr described concrete instances that showed how his vision deteriorated. After just one bike ride, he was terrified of careening into distant trees. When at a social event, he had to perform the scene from Young Frankenstein, because he couldn't remember the name of the film that had shaped his career. Even though they were concerning, these early symptoms highlighted how sneaky Alzheimer's disease is. The disease systematically destroys memory, motor skills, and autonomy. As Burr points out, such observations can be emotionally taxing because the person you love changes little yet significantly every day, necessitating more attention and support. Burr talked openly about how the sickness progresses, highlighting how terrible and unforgiving it is. There is no chance for recovery or stabilization with Alzheimer's, unlike with some malignancies or illnesses. After years of gradual loss of synaptic function, Wilder's cognitive abilities and motor control deteriorated to the point that even breathing and swallowing were dangerously impaired. Wilder dealt with the news with elegance and grace, facing his own collapse with incredible bravery. As Burr described, despite this painful reality, she went into detail about the ongoing interventions and changes that were required to ensure his safety. After he was hurt trying to undo his pants' drawstrings, and after he put his watch away. Though utilitarian, these deeds reflected the special obligations and challenges of caring for an individual with Alzheimer's, and were very personal demonstrations of care. Burr stressed that moments of happiness and connection continued even as the decline progressed. She described times when they could laugh, remember good times, and do things together, showing that the cancer, terrible as it was, could not have ruined the bond they had formed over the years. She showed her inventiveness and determination to help Wilder retain his independence despite the limitations caused by his sickness by, for instance, guiding him safely across the pool following a fall on the patio. Once again, Wilder's never-ending sense of humor and stage presence shone through as he addressed a made-up crowd with a joke that brought back memories of his struggles to get out of a chair. "Hold on a second, everyone. My return is imminent." Even though Wilder's physical and mental faculties were deteriorating due to the sickness, these instances provided humor and confirmed that his personality and spirit persisted. Also discussed by Burr was the heavy burden that caring for another person places on the caregiver, touching on the mental, spiritual, and physical demands of the job. Caregivers of people with Alzheimer's disease are not only impacted by the condition itself, but also by the weariness, mental distress, and potential health complications that come with providing daily care. According to Burr, who drew on research provided by Stanford Medicine and the Alzheimer's Association, many caregivers die before their patients do, not from the disease but from the stress of caring for a long time. These numbers demonstrated how serious her duties were, and how vigilant she had to be to attend to Wilder's physical and mental requirements, without sacrificing her own health. To fully grasp the effects of Alzheimer's disease, it is essential to comprehend the struggles endured by caregivers, which Burr's observations shed light on. Burr expressed the depth of enduring love and the certainty of loss while describing Wilder's last days. At the moment of his final breaths, she was by his side, and the air was heavy with trust and intimacy. The last words Wilder spoke to her, "I trust you," conveyed an extraordinary blend of reliance, assurance, and lasting bond, even though there had been days of stillness. The tale by Burr highlights the depth of the caregiver-patient relationship, shedding light on the emotional aspects of seeing a loved one deteriorate while attempting to offer compassion, dignity, and continuity of care. Her story is a moving monument to her own strength and resilience as a caregiver and an allegory for the universality of such struggles. Burr made a connection between her own life and the larger need for education, activism, and study. Early diagnosis, more funding for research, and a cure for Alzheimer's disease are her goals, and she hopes that her story, Wilder's legacy, and public initiatives can help get us there. She spoke highly of recent charitable initiatives, such as the landmark $100 million pledge to Alzheimer's research by the Gates Foundation, as encouraging and validating of continuing scientific work. She went on to talk about her work with the Pure Imagination Project, which used Willy Wonka, the legendary figure created by Wilder's, to bring attention to Alzheimer's disease and inspire more people to become involved in the battle against it. The effect of Wilder's legacy goes beyond his artistic achievements, because to Burr's efforts that showcase how personal suffering can be turned into